Right, hello everybody. Let me stop my sharing. Hello everyone, welcome to what is the first online design labs. I hope you're all well. Thank you very much for joining us. My name's Tim. I'm going to be sort of the host of this. I'm not going to be one of the speakers. I'm going to introduce you to them shortly. But yeah, thank you all very much for joining us. This webinar is going to be of a topic of how to foster remote collaboration and culture. Like I said, my name's Tim. I'm with Novoda, and Novoda's been running Design Labs for 5 years now. Design Lab is an event in both Berlin and London. Across from both, there's about over 5,000 members, focusing mainly on bringing together designers to share experiences, talk shop, that kind of thing. But this is the first online remote webinar, so exciting. Hopefully hello to both cities and wider, potentially. But yeah, brilliant. So thank you so much for joining. I really hope you're going to enjoy it. I really hope that it's going to run smoothly. We shall see. I have all good thoughts that it will. Before we get stuck in, I thought I would just give you a run through of what's going to happen. So we're going to have two 15 to 20-minute talks by the two speakers, and then afterwards we're going to have some Q&A. Now, if you see in the Zoom chat, there's a Q&A feature. Please chuck questions in there as we go along. The two speakers aren't going to be answering questions as they go, just not to ruin their rhythm. What we're going to do is have it at the end. So if you have something that pops into your mind whilst they speak, please feel free to chuck it in the Q&A. Importantly, not the chat. I'm not going to be looking at the chat for questions. Feel free to chat away in there, but questions that you want answered, please put it in the Q&A. And then, yeah, at the end, I'm going to be running through it. So what have we got? Who have we got? I'm going to first, I'll run through them. So Leonie Brewin, the head of design, is going to be talking about energizing teams through remote culture. And we're also joined by Tim Liu, who is the executive director of strategy at Foolproof, who's going to be talking about practical tips to nurture and maintain distributed culture. Brilliant. Right, last couple of things from me. We are going to be recording this, hence why you should all automatically have your cameras off and your microphones off, just to make you aware. But we are going to share the recording with you and the slides and a few other things at the end. Right, okay, so that is more than enough from me. Hopefully that's a good enough intro. Without further ado, I am going to be passing you on to our first speaker, which is Leonie Brewin.
Hello, everybody. Can you all see my screen okay?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you very much, Tim. Lovely intro. So yeah, my name is Leonie. I'm head of design at Novoda. I have a background in user experience design. I've been specializing in mobile applications for the past 10 years or so. So as well as leading design at Novoda, I also run strategy, design, and team workshops for our clients. I also run internal initiatives, such as an initiative we're running right now, which is to improve the way that we're working across distributed locations. As well as that, normally when in normal times, I'm the host at Design Lab Berlin, and I also work with an organization called Future Legends, running design workshops for kids here in Berlin as well. So first of all, a little bit about Novoda. Novoda is the organization behind Design Lab, where I've been working for the last 6 years. So as Novoda, we create collaborative environments to guide strategy, design, and development for meaningful mobile applications. So what that means is we're a collective of designers, product strategists, and engineers who work together to build mobile applications with our clients. So Novoda's been working in remote, has been embracing remote working for many years across offices and countries and even different continents. So we've developed tools, capabilities, and behaviours over the years to improve the way that we're working across distributed locations. So we've been doing this for a long time. We've made a lot of, had a lot of learnings along the way, and we've optimized the way that we're working. But for anyone who this is completely new to, I wanted to start by running through a few challenges that you might face, a few challenges maybe you've already faced in the past few months, and then dig into some tips and tricks that we've learned along the way that might help you. So first of all, the recognition that it requires teams to adopt completely new tools and behaviours when you're working remotely. And this adaptation, not just of adopting new tools, but also adopting new behaviours as individuals and teams, can take time. It takes time as well as patience, and it requires flexibility from business leaders as well as team members. I'm sure we've all experienced technical difficulties over the past few months. It can really hinder the natural flow of conversation if maybe your internet connection isn't quite so good, or you're needing to mute and unmute yourself all the time. It can change the natural flow of conversation. It can also cause frustrations and make effective communication that little bit more challenging. Of course, when we're all at home, we've got our mobile phones and our laptops directly in front of us. So when we're working digitally, our screens are always filled with distractions. There's lots of messages and notifications coming up, and there's an overwhelming temptation to multitask, to take on too many things, or to try and stay focused on one thing, and that it's just becoming ever more difficult with messages and other distractions. And as humans, we have a fundamental need for connection and expression. And communication can be more difficult without the intricacies of human communication and body language. It could be much harder, for instance, to show resonance or to raise concern. So the question is, how can remote collaboration aid you and your teams to work more effectively together? So we found that by putting some guidelines and regular behaviours in place, it's much easier to overcome these challenges and create more positive working environments. And it also sets the stage for more inclusive working environments moving forward. So there's a lot of people at the moment who are working from home or working from alternative locations. And by nailing these behaviours and these tools now, can really help everybody to continue more inclusive working environments for those people who are working remotely while maybe you're in an office in the future. So how can remote collaboration aid your teams? Collaboration and working together helps teams to stay aligned, to stay focused on their purpose, to stay focused on their intentions, and to reach outcomes together. Working together, whether it be as individuals, like pairing, working together, small meetings, or even larger workshops, can increase productivity and encourage teams to work together towards a single focus whilst reducing distractions. Collaboration is also really, really key when it comes to nurturing positive and enjoyable environments, nurturing positive cultures. So when I talk about culture, I'm really referring to human behaviours and the environments that we are interacting within. So I think that's even more important when we don't necessarily have the daily contact that we're used to and we're all working across distributed locations. So the question, how can you energize distributed teams? So how can we keep the energy up when we're all in different places and we're not necessarily having that connection that we would normally have? So the first, and it's been a focus at Novoda for many years, even before the challenges of 2020. So it's really important that teams and individuals feel trusted and empowered to work remotely. That's one of the really important things at Novoda. It's even more important for us to actively care for the health and mental well-being of teams. I think when we're all working from home, our work-life balance is much harder to look after. So if we have a bit more of a blurred line between our workspace and our living space, it's easy to start working too many hours, or we forget to take our break, or we don't take a full lunch break. So it's really important. The second thing is to support the use of new tools and practices, especially if teams are experienced, team members are, have never experienced these tools before. It's really important to make sure that people are supported and guided through the use of new tools, or the use of new practices or behaviours that might help the teams to be more effective when working in distributed locations. Design collaboration with purpose. So it's really important that collaborative experiences are engaging and powerful. And all of our time is precious, and I think it's really important to be able to optimize this time as much as possible. So into the tips. How do you foster a culture of trust and well-being? There's a lot that goes into it, but I'll try and talk about some of the things that we've done in Novoda. So one of the main things that I've found especially useful, and it's working with a team within Novoda who are made up of different specialists in different disciplines. We found that having support guidelines with requirements and recommendations for how to make distributed work effective and enjoyable, really effective. Something so that people have an understanding as to how they should be behaving, and the different things that they can do to make distributed working more effective for themselves, more effective for their teams, and also just generally more enjoyable. So that's something we've put together. We also encourage transparency around availability, and this is primarily so that team members know where everybody is, just so that they can make sure that they plan the best times to collaborate and work together. We ensure that team members have the tools and equipment that they need to support a healthy and professional working space. So help people to understand, the equipment that they might need in order to have an effective video call or an effective workshop, but also what guidelines for having a professional and effective working space as well. We have regular support sessions and one-to-ones with all of our team members. This is a normal part of life at Novoda, but it's especially important, I think, when people are isolated. And we also have had an even stronger focus on health and well-being, especially since the beginning of this year. So I think just for team members alike, as well as for maybe people in management or mentoring positions, it's really important to encourage a healthy work-life balance with those people that you're supporting. Check that people are having enough breaks and they're not slipping into the habit of maybe working too long hours, and just check in that everyone's doing okay. I think this is especially important when people are isolated and not able to have the same level of daily support. The next is to be thankful. It requires a lot of flexibility, I think, to work effectively in distributed locations, and I think to be thankful to the teams that you're working with, and also give yourself a degree of thanks as well for your own flexibility. And then the next one is to stay social. Without being able to catch up in the office, it's hard to keep this feeling of like positive, friendly culture. So something we've started doing is just to arrange quick coffee catch-ups. So we have a tool integrated to our Slack channel, which essentially links different people up so we can have regular coffee chats with each other. And that's been really nice for encouraging people to speak to people that they haven't necessarily spoken to before, or don't speak to on a regular basis. So I would say I have like 10, 20 people within the organization who I speak to more regularly, and that means there's a fair amount of people on the other side who I don't get the chance to catch up with. So that's been a really nice opportunity that we wouldn't have necessarily had before. We've also arranged lots of like alternative socials. So instead of getting together and going out for drinks or having dinner together, we've arranged baking nights and Novoda pub quizzes. We've had happy hours and played some games and competitions together as well. So there's a lot that can be done online, and I think it really does wonders for the feeling of positive culture and really enjoying work life. So coming to the question of how do you support the use of new tools and practices, I think generally with tools and practices, you're likely to have a mixture of old and new behaviours and old and new tools. So some of them you're going to be using more, some of them a little bit less. It might be that you realise, some of the things you were doing are just less relevant. And I think it just requires that conscious effort to work out which of those are going to be most helpful to teams and which ones maybe are less important. I think keeping a regular schedule helps, helps for like social connection, as well as just alignment on teams. Again, I think it takes you need to take a conscious approach to reviewing and adapting the needs of the teams, and making sure that you're not keeping regular slots for the sake of regularity, but more that you have some regular cadence with really meaningful sessions together. Also, don't let the action stop. So there's no reason to stop collaboration while we're working remotely. It can be easier when we're remote to stop as much collaboration. But especially if you've worked hard to make collaboration standard behavior in your organization, whether it be individual like pairing or whether it be group work, I think it's really important to keep that regularity. For instance, if you'd normally run a team session, a workshop, or even a design sprint, it's still perfectly possible to do remote. It comes with its challenges. It absolutely needs some adaptation, but it can still be really, really valuable. It's worth considering the tools and equipment, as I say, that might need to change depending on where you're at. Focus on those that are going to aid productivity and support healthy working environments. As I say, offering support and guidance, especially if you've got new tools, I think can be really helpful, partly in a session itself. If you're preparing a workshop, make sure that everybody is familiar with that tool beforehand, or that you offer some kind of onboarding. But generally, if you're introducing new tools as an organization, then to be able to support people in that change is valuable. I think a lot of organizations take time to reflect running retrospectives or such like. I think continuing that cadence and having sharing the learnings, optimizing your processes are equally important, if not even more important, when we're working in distributed locations. And the last one, to be patient and empathize. This is a new environment, it's new tools and behaviors, and I think it does take some time to adjust. So being patient with yourself and your team is really important. So how do you design collaboration with purpose? People's time is precious. I think when sessions are designed effectively, input can be really, really valuable, and collaboration can be extremely effective. As you would normally be running a workshop, you would normally seek intention and define what success for that workshop might look like. So similarly to planning any workshop, it's important to seek a clear purpose for the session and outline success metrics. I tend to do this by speaking with key stakeholders and participants of that workshop to really understand what it is that they want to be able to get out of the workshop, and then stating really clear intentions and having agreement on that before I get started on designing the workshop session themselves. Of course, the next thing is once you've got your clear goals, to go goal by goal and organize the sessions that are going to help you to achieve those goals most effectively. It might be that you're used to running workshops in a physical space, in which case you can take what you normally would do and just adapt them for online use instead. And the next is to prepare your attendees. So normally you would prepare your attendees, invite the right people, those people who are maybe key stakeholders or representative of certain groups or areas, ensure the attendance and availability. But in addition to that, when we're working in distributed locations, you need to consider if there's any materials that people might need to get in advance. For instance, if they need some paper or pens or sticky notes or anything like that, make sure that everyone has enough time to be able to prepare those things. Also, normally when you're running workshops, you'll provide some kind of snacks, refreshments, and I think that's also important. Remind people to have some snacks ready, and grab a glass of water before the session. And generally to provide tips in advance for arranging a comfortable working space, and offer any guidance on tooling if it's something that they're not necessarily used to using. Normally you would have a physical space to run a workshop, and you really get to know your space. You arrange your boards, you you work through each of the different sessions of your workshop. It's equally as important when you're doing this remotely, if not even more important, to create that virtual space for your participants to collaborate. Walk through your board and consider how you're going to facilitate the session, and then how you might need to adapt that session as well. And be ready to support people in that new environment. As I say, if there's people who are getting used to new tools, then a quick walkthrough can be really helpful. So set new ground rules, especially if I'm running a design sprint. It's really helpful, like with longer term workshops lasting any more than a couple of hours. Or for any workshop, it's important to set new ground rules. So for instance, you might ask people to leave their laptops for the duration of the workshop, to avoid any distractions on their phones, that kind of thing. So you might have similar ground rules in the workshop, and this is really rules to be able to guide successful collaboration and make that session as impactful as possible. So for instance, instead of asking people to avoid their laptops and phones, which of course isn't possible in this case, instead you might ask them to reduce any of their distractions, such as Slack notifications or emails popping up, anything that might make the session more distracted. Also, you can consider alternative behaviours. So at Novoda, we use +1 quite a lot. So it's just a way of showing resonance. If we really want to encourage what somebody is saying, then we might say +1. So if you're working in an environment where you're going to need to mute and unmute yourself, there are alternative ways to do that as well, depending on the tool that you're using. Includes breaks and energizers, especially in those long workshops. It's equally important to make sure that we have a bit of fun, but also that we have breaks whenever we need it, especially in a remote environment where we're all sat on our chairs in our space. I think it's very helpful to just get a bit of a break, to have some fresh air, to grab some water, and also have fun, like with some alternative energizers. We've been doing a lot of drawing games lately on Miro, which has been really great fun. The most recent one I ran was asking the team to draw a new animal every 20 seconds, I think it was. So that was really, really good fun. And I think there's a lot of fun that can be had through remote workshops. The next one, to be flexible and forgiving. Especially working with unfamiliar platforms, it can be really exhausting, and sometimes you might need to go to a plan B. As long as you're prepared for that, everything will be fine. So yeah, next steps would normally be part of a workshop, and you'd make sure that people are clear on next steps. Be thankful to your participants. Again, hopefully that's something that most people will be doing already, but it's really important to show your thanks and be appreciative. And the last is to share widely. I think this is even more important when you're working in distributed locations, to make sure that you increase transparency as much as possible, so that the teams have an understanding of what's happening across different teams and different working efforts, and are able to contribute to that, and have an increased level of awareness as to what the rest of the organization is up to. So when you get it right, we can always make improvements, but when you get it right, you can have a more inclusive working environment, a new feeling of team togetherness. You can increase productivity, increase transparency, and have happier teams. So just some key takeaways. It's worth considering some guidelines and support for your teams. Increase focus on health and well-being, look after your team members. Stay social. You can have a lot of fun online, and keep collaboration alive. So try not to let that go. It's a really nice way to keep a positive culture as well as be effective. Reflect and evolve. So continue to reflect on how you're working, change the way that you're working, and constantly check in with yourself. Also, design engaging experiences, be patient, and be kind to yourself. Couple of resources and shout outs. So I mentioned I work with an organization called Future Legends. We're running design thinking workshops for kids here in Berlin. On the right there, we've got the Novoda Insights page. So we've got a lot of blogs, and right now there's one on it with our top tips for remote working tools and practices, which was nothing to do with me, but a wonderful read. At the bottom there, we've got Liberating Structures. Liberating Structures are a set of workshop techniques which are primarily meant for the physical space, but can also be adapted to online. Then in the middle, we have Design Sprint Academy, where I've learned a lot of my facilitation techniques. Design Sprint Academy are based in Berlin. They offer training and design sprints and all sorts of boot camps to help people with facilitation. And on the left there, we have a write-up of the most recent IXTA session, which was and right at the bottom of that article there's a video, so you can have a read through that to see the write-up. Other than that, I think that's me. Thank you very much. I'll hand back to Tim.
Amazing. Thank you very, very much, Leonie. You're going to be sharing your slides with us afterwards as well, so anyone who's got questions about those links or anything, you'll be able to see it. But yes, thank you, Leonie. Awesome. And we're going to now move very swiftly on to the other Tim Lu, the more important Tim. So yeah, over to you, Tim.
We can't hear you.
We can't hear you for some reason, Tim.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
That's called user error. Hello, everyone. And thank you to Leonie for that great presentation. There's a lot for me in that as well. I'm going to share my screen now. See if I can make that work. Okay. Great. Can everyone see that?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Great. So thanks to everyone who's joined, and thanks to Leonie and Tim for the intro. Yeah, I thought I'd just give a quick intro to Foolproof. Foolproof's a design company. We've been around for about 18 years. I've been at Foolproof for 16 years. It's a long time. And we're an experienced design company with studios in the UK, Singapore, and India. And we're part of a global services company called Zenza, servicing clients around the globe. Just numbers-wise, we're about 120 people, but our group company has about 11,000 people. So going into, and the presentation I'm going to share with you today is really about sort of what we've been, sort of reflections on what's happened in the last few months. And I thought I'd just try and share some learnings that our organisation's taken in trying to manage through the crisis and this sort of sudden, everyone's remote. Going into the lockdown, we were working with clients both on site in their offices, but all off-site, either sort of remotely at home or from our design studios, and working with the clients and also with their users. So we do a lot of not just design, but research as well. And these were with clients across Europe, Asia, North America, and South Africa. And so when the crisis hit and we went into lockdown, there was an immediate shift to remote working. And I think we went into remote working, so full company remote working, about a week and a half before the official UK lockdown. We thought it would be good to try it out, and it became increasingly clear that it wasn't a good idea to send our staff and colleagues into the office. Despite all that, we continued to deliver, and we're still delivering. So the first thing, and I think to pick up on something that Leonie said, I think we should be grateful. I mean, I think I feel really privileged, and I think Foolproof feels very privileged and blessed that our work and our workspaces were able to shift almost seamlessly into this distributed environment. But there's some observations and learnings to take out of the initial crisis response phase that we went into, and I thought I'd share a couple of these with you. So the first is we had a digital workspace in the cloud, so it was pretty easy to just pick up your laptop and then not come back to the office. In fact, some people even took their chairs home with them because they didn't have good chairs at home, and were even sort of, I could see people wanting to dismantle their desks. But broadly speaking, people could take their work home. And actually, when we think about tools, and I think Leonie made some great points about this, the way I sort of think about it is we have tools for everyone. And because we're a design studio that we have people that work in client engagement, new business, support functions like HR and IT. And so there's a tool set that we're all familiar with and probably use every day. And then there are probably more specialist tools that are used by researchers and designers and developers. But I think it became pretty clear that everyone had them, but not everyone knew how to get the best out of all of the tools that we had. And I think our reflection is that now is a critical period to upskill. You know, if we don't get everyone really, really good at knowing how to turn off Slack notifications that they don't want to see, or running a basic session in Miro, that actually they'll be de-skilled by the end of this period. So we think this is a critical period for everyone to review and renew skills and expertise. To the extent that I think the lines moved. I think the lines moved where we would say everyone in the company, and this is whether you're a designer or a researcher, work in front of house on our reception, they should know how to use Miro. You know, if we didn't have to train people how to write on a post-it note and then stick it on a wall, but we sort of need to do that now. And we need to make sure that everyone feels absolutely happy and confident in doing that. And there are other tools which I would describe as horizontal tools. They're not specific vertical tools that get used by a particular functional discipline or practice. Tools like Airtable and Typeform are tools that everyone should know how to use, I think, because it'll increase collaboration and creativity if we all are working on the same tool set. So I think that line has to shift over a bit and include some new things. So I love watching these sorts of things, but this is a Miro swarm. This is actually one of our studio meetings where we typically have probably about 60 people from our design studio and other members of the team. And we've been running these weekly, both in terms of trying to understand where people are at, what they're struggling with, what are the challenges, what's working well, what things would we actually want to continue doing once we get to go back to the office at some stage. It's also a way of getting people to be comfortable and learn about the tool set. And so some of the names on here are people who are absolute ninjas in Miro, and some people have never used it before. And it's really, really important that we make everyone, we have to make these tools inclusive for people. I would say before the crisis, we had a very good mix of structured and informal one-to-ones, team and company communications. It's quite structured, and we spent a long time thinking about, do we have the right number of meetings? Do we have too many meetings? You know, the meeting's too long. Do they repeat themselves? But the cadence of our meetings probably looks something like this prior to the lockdown. So project teams, obviously, they meet very regularly. So for things like daily stand-ups and that sort of stuff. And obviously meeting with clients and working as sort of part of broader teams. But then on a weekly basis, we have Friday all company meetings. So that's people dialing in from Singapore and sort of our studios in the UK and from client sites. And then each one of the teams, so the design studio and the sales team and all of our sort of functional teams, they have weekly team meetings. And then we have things called smart lunches. So every week, I think on a Wednesday, we'll have either an internal or external speaker to come and talk about something interesting. And so often that's practice related, so how to do a new thing, or here's some interesting research. But often it's something completely left field and just interesting for us to learn about. Every Friday at 3:30 we have cake, so everyone has to down tools and grab a cup of tea or a beer and have some cake together, and we make sure that we stand around and have a chat, because actually not everyone can go to the pub. I'll put my hand up. I can't go to the pub often on a Friday evening. And then there's the pub, clearly. And then as we sort of move further out, there's things like sort of leadership team meetings, and then on a sort of monthly, sort of quarterly basis, we have quite a lot of structured and planned communication. So things like town hall meetings where everyone can ask the leadership questions about how the business is performing and what's coming up on the horizon. Do quarterly offsites. We take everyone off site to somewhere cool. Our next offsite was supposed to be at the beach. We have an annual beach party up in the Norfolk coast, which is terrific. And once a year, we take everyone to Spain for a 3-day jolly. And so all of these things have been sort of well established and well thought about. But when the crisis hit, we had to switch up very quickly. So for some meetings, we obviously needed to get together more frequently. And initially, when the UK government were giving daily updates that gave you information, we would have to get together every day and talk about what happened yesterday, and is there any information that we need to sort of take on board in the way that we're communicating or managing, making decisions. And that's happened across the board. And critically, when you get into a crisis mode, decision-making, communication, and transparency is vital. I think this really echoes what Leonie was saying in her presentation. And so if you look at what's actually really happened pretty much within a week of going into lockdown, leadership team meetings became every day for 30 minutes or less. So sometimes often the government doesn't tell us anything now. So actually on a daily basis, you don't need to necessarily adjust what's happening, but we still do it. We still do it. Teams are getting together more often now. And so the studio team gets together twice a week, one to sort of check in on people and projects, and secondly to do more detailed sharing about what we've learned, or to work on internal projects or practice development. We've had to bring forward town hall meetings so that people can sort of ask questions and talk directly to the leadership. And you can see there's a bunch of things on the right-hand side around these offsites and the beach trip. We're thinking about now, what are we going to do about these things? Because we're going to have to do something new and different. I think Leonie she sort of really covered this in a way. Like it's very easy to maintain relationships when you see everyone. You sort of take it for granted. And so we've had everyone in the team, sort of either individually or within their sort of subgroups, has had to find ways to stay connected and stay in mind. And that picture is actually my wall just behind my computer, which basically are people that I want to make sure that I don't forget to just have a chat with or check in with, or we're working on stuff together. And that's my way. And I know actually one of my colleagues, James, he even has pictures of the people around him. And I think it's cool, but I think we have to find the ways that are going to work for us and work for our workspaces. I saw this tweet a few weeks ago. I really, really like it. It's worth saying that we are not working from home. We are at home during a global crisis trying to work. Yeah. So what we are talking about is we are in an exceptional time. I don't know if any of you guys have children. The working from home is fine for me. Having my 2 children just outside that door and having to homeschool during the day is very stressful. It's very, very, very stressful. So making sure that we're sort of being supportive but flexible and kind of knowing when to leave people alone is being really, really key. I thought that we're sort of starting to come through the initial crisis response is to think more about what I'm the place is I work at my desk, but I belong to Foolproof. And what does that mean? What does that mean to be part of the Foolproof workplace? And that really sort of is about answering this question: how do you make people feel as though they're part of something bigger than just the project that they're working on, or the task that they're doing, or the Zoom call that they're in? And I think these are a few things that we're thinking about and experimenting with. So the first one is, how might we design serendipitous encounters when we can't bump into each other? My most interesting ideas at work, broadly speaking, happen on the stairwell in our office between the ground floor and the first floor, where I bump into David or Phil or James or Gaynor, and we talk about something that's been on my mind, and then we go, hang on, are you getting a sandwich now? Let's go get a sandwich. That's impossible now. So how do we do that? We haven't really cracked it, but we're spending time thinking about it. And this is, I wanted to show you something that one of our guys built. It's a conversation roulette wheel. So basically what it allows you to do is to click a button and it will find you someone to talk to and even give you a conversation starter. It's deliberately random. It's supposed to get you just to do something completely different or not in your calendar in the day. We like it. We like it. And I think there are things like Donut and Slack and sort of other tools that I think Leonie mentioned as well. But it's been really, really fun to come up with some of these ideas. Some of them work and some of them don't. Key thing is to quickly experiment and see. Okay. So the second one is, how do we further champion and celebrate the generosity of sharing? So that's a bit of a mouthful. But I have this theory that positive cultures are created by givers, not takers. Places that are terrific to work at have people who have this way of being generous with their time and their knowledge and their support and their help. And that's an environment that Foolproof's always been sort of aspiring to have. And I think we're quite good. We can always be better. But how do we do that? And it sort of made me think. So last week, one of our teams in Singapore gave a presentation. They've just done a very, very intense piece of work with an airline, which was running a lean startup workshop for 10 different companies that are partnering with this company simultaneously. And so it was just like, wow, that's a massively difficult, complicated thing to do. And when they told us the story, we said, wow, could you do a smart breakfast? Because obviously in Singapore, for them to make it a reasonable time, we made it breakfast. And they were really, really busy, but then they just created time and gave us a fantastic presentation that was shared a lot about specifically what they did and some of the lessons. You know, even on the slide here, Leonie, you talked about this here. Too much screen time. People will do that, and I was so grateful. And I think the leadership really wanted to make a big deal about what these guys were doing, because this is the sort of things that make work interesting and fun and enriching. And the last one is, how do you make Foolproof make it almost mandatory that we can still have fun and have a laugh, but in a way that is inclusive and flexible, i.e. that people aren't forced into things that they don't want to do. You know, at lunchtime, I've got to spend time with my family, and it's not that I don't want to spend time with my colleagues. I just can't sort of join in some of the stuff. So how do you do this? Well, we're trying stuff. We're trying loads of things. So this is one of the, as Leonie described, things like Novoda Bakes. This is a cook-along that I did. I was very proud of my tech setup, 2 cameras set up. But all company, so we had probably about 40 people cooking a pantry pasta dish. It was fun, and some of the things that we've tried have been terrific and really useful, and some of them haven't worked. But the key thing is every week we try. Every week we're giving it a go. And now when we're thinking about the bigger things, this is the banner from our beach trip last year on the beach up in North Norfolk. So we've got to spend time in thinking about this. Just to conclude, I'd say great work cultures. I mean, there's plenty of good work cultures, but really great ones are almost always intentional and deliberate, and they're never pushed. But if we can build and sustain a fun, inclusive, enriching, a remote environment, actually, it's really beneficial because we might be able to hire people that don't live in London or Norwich or Singapore. We might have people from Edinburgh or Madrid or Barcelona or Narrow. And that for us is really, really exciting idea. And I think the key thing for us is, as we get through this crisis and beyond, we need to empower culture makers to combine that intentionality with creativity and time. So stay alert. Good luck and thanks.
Great, thank you very much, Tim. Awesome. Yeah, awesome. Thank you both. Tim, that was super interesting. Really appreciate it. If you could stop sharing your screen.
Oh, how do I do that?
No worries, just so we can get everyone up. Excellent. Great. So great thing is we've already had some questions coming in. What I'm going to do, thank you for everyone who's put questions. We're going to try and make it through them. Leonie and Tim are both going to stick around for some questions now. If we don't get through them all, we will have a follow-up like blog post or something we can send out to people or share. So apologies if we don't within time. We've got 12 minutes and I thought it'd be good to crack on. So top question, and Leonie, I'm going to aim this at you because it came up during your talk. Well, you first. Is there something specific you can do to check in on people's mental health?
The main thing that I do, so as head of design, I'm managing a team of 8 people, 2 of whom are on maternity at the moment. I have one-to-ones every 2 weeks with all of the team. Like we have a really, really strong relationship as a group and individually. So I'm really lucky in that the team are very open and honest with me. I think that comes from the attitude of management, as being caring as a manager. So thankfully the rest of the team are really open. There are various different things that you can do to support somebody. Like if there is somebody who is struggling, things like keeping a journal of how they're feeling, or just having more regular check-ins than you normally would. So changing a bi-weekly check-in maybe to every week. But really, what I've found in the past is that it's better to talk to that individual about their specific needs. Like mental health troubles are very individual to each individual person. So for me, it's really just a case of taking things step by step, seeking advice on how you can best support people, and offering structures and active support for anybody who needs any extra support.
Great, thank you. Tim, do you have anything to add on that question as well?
I mean, certainly we've really been thinking about this a lot, because we're not mental health experts, we're not. But never has there been a time where line management has been more important. People have to check in on their people. And I think it is important for you to understand what the world around that person is at the moment. We have people who are extroverts and introverts. It's funny, our introvert guys are kind of liking the working from home and not having to be in too many things. But then we also have people who their immediate family is sort of very affected by everything that's happening, or or they themselves are actually high risk in some other way. So just the first part for us is really just understanding the situation for people.
So both of your suggestions are like more support, more check-ins, more that way, and more transparency as well. Obviously, that takes time. How do you balance that against, like, getting work done? It's part of it because you have to have the right culture, but how do you get the right balance? And it kind of makes one of the questions down here. It says that they see a drop in productivity, and if you're doing all these check-ins as well, how do you really get that balance? For Tim to start with.
I mean, the answer is yes, it is less productive. And so we have to accept that, and the teams and the clients that we work with must be made to understand that. Because nothing's really more important at this time than the people that we have. And so it's whatever it takes. Some of our guys seem absolutely fine. They seem sort of happy with working from home, and they don't have to travel all the way across London to travel and see that client every single day now. And for some people, it's been incredibly isolating and lonely. And so everything is absolutely got to be specific to the individual at the moment, and that takes time. You've got to make that time.
And then Leonie, just to add a little bit on top of that, a question here says they're seeing like a descending curve during meetings as well. So it's not only keeping people engaged during the day, but in specific meetings. Like, how would you help with productivity in that?
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to the things that I was talking about during the talk. There's we need to be accepting that this is a big change for people. It's a big change for behaviours. It's a big change adopting tools. And exactly as Tim says, different people will react differently. Some people will be like, brilliant, I can work on my own. I don't want any meetings. I don't want any workshops. I just want to be able to crack on, and this is a great opportunity for me. Others will crave social connection and collaboration. So I think exactly as Tim says, there's a lot of people who will react differently. In terms of keeping up production, I would say often the problem is transparency more than it is productivity. So it's more that maybe people are being equally as effective. I don't doubt for a moment that anyone certainly at Novoda is doing anything any less. I think if there's a perceived lack of productivity, then it may be just a lack of collaboration or a lack of transparency. So yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick one. I saw someone pop a question in the chat. If you could copy that into the Q&A feature in Zoom, we can capture them all afterwards. I don't want to lose any of your questions. Okay, so Leonie, straight back at you. How can I help make meetings, workshops more productive as someone who's not the organizer? How do I approach this topic with my manager, a team, as a junior designer?
Oh, awesome question. How would I do it? I think I would start by taking a structured approach to talking about anything that's the way that sessions are being structured now. So to say, okay, this was the situation, this was what happened, this was the impact. We did it in this way, and this is what we were able to do. And then to be able to highlight opportunity to say, from this, I believe that we might be more effective if we were to do this. Could we just have a discussion about it? Or even, to offer to run a session yourself to explore it. But I think generally focusing on it's much easier to have those levels of conversations if you can talk about situation and impact and suggestion, as opposed to just, hey, I've got a new idea. So I think think about the person who you might need to approach this with, think about what they would like to achieve and where they would like to have a stronger impact. And if you can work that conversation to be focused on how they might be able to have more effective communication and higher productivity, then I can't see that they wouldn't be interested.
Any tips for during a workshop as well? That's talking around it as well, but what if you're in the middle of it, you can feel that motivation's down? How can you get it up?
I always say when I talk about these guidelines for workshops, one of mine is always shout if you need a break. like, don't even hesitate. Like, if you feel if it's low energy, if you read the room and you think actually it's low energy in the room, like virtual environment as much as anything, then to always shout up. And I think actually having those guidelines at the beginning are helpful. If those guidelines aren't set, I think just popping your hand up and saying, hey, like, I don't know, I feel like the energy is a bit low. How would you guys feel about having a break? And for that to be a question out to the whole group, I think is probably the best way to do it, the way I would approach it.
Awesome, thank you. And Tim, how...
guidelines for the next one.
Sorry, Leonie, I didn't catch that.
Also potentially seeing some guidelines to the next one.
Excellent, thank you. And Tim, any suggestions for getting less vocal people involved in remote workshops? If you're on a Zoom call, I can imagine it's quite easier to sort of be left aside if you're not on the screen prominently, or if you're in a room. So have you found ways of getting that getting those people more involved?
Yeah, I mean, workshops are a bit of a thing for me. Remote, there's been a good learning. I mean, one observation that we've had, we've done quite a lot of workshops in the last 2 months now, and actually the people who are more quiet in the room have actually been better served in remote workshops, because there's less chat and they can sort of just get on with, if you're doing some sort of generative exercise, brainstorming or ideation, what we're finding is everyone's a bit more productive in getting on with it. I mean, we try and get people to turn their cameras on too for sessions. I think it does sort of make you engage more when you have had to change out of your pajamas and look down the camera.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely do that in Novoda as well, always cameras on. We've only got 2 minutes left, so I'm going to do one last question for you both to have a think. The question is more based around, so this is redefining what the need of an office is, right? You're talking about ways of how we're adjusting to this. But, and Tim, you loosely touched on it, thinking about what happens in the future. But yeah, what is going to happen when we're back to normal? Is it going to change the way people are going to work? Is it going to change the way that people, the purpose of an office? Like, what do you think the impact's going to be? And is it good or bad, Tim?
My sense is really good. Really, 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 really good. And I read something this morning, actually, which I thought was quite a nice idea. A friend of mine, Ryan, he was saying, rather than a company having 10 floors in a city, 10 floors of a building in a city, they might have 1 floor in 10 cities. And that, for me, is a more interesting company to work at, I think, if you can make the collaboration and the remote culture part work. I mean, I was in a roundtable with some C-suite guys in our client organisations last week. Most of them were saying we're reviewing real estate because it's such a huge cost. It's a huge cost for a lot of organisations.
Mm-hmm.
Same to you, Leonie. Well, how do you think things are going to change?
Well, I mean, different organizations were already at a different level of maturity, I think, when it comes to adopting that behavior. Like Tim says, like, both of our organizations are already, like, we're very lucky in that we're already very well set up for distributed working. We already had that opportunity beforehand. So I think it's obviously going to vary based on, like, the, maturity of organizations to be able to work this way. But I see it being a positive. I guess I can only really speak for Novoda. Before we had a couple of different offices, like, across Europe, who were in different places, and then each of the offices were making sure that we could make it inclusive for people who were working alone in other locations, which is nice. Whereas us all coming together and being in the same situation has meant that our remote culture needed to take that step forward, so everyone is adopting those behaviors and not some people. So before, we might have had a meeting room where some people are dialing in, but we're all talking to each other in a meeting room, but it's a bit more difficult for maybe those people who are dialing in to hear what we're saying. You know, that kind of example, whereas now we're all saying, you know, we're all going to go with remote first. And we had started doing this before the start of this year on projects, where regardless of if you've got 10 people in one location, you all still join on your laptops with your headphones, because it means the quality of communication is just far better for that larger group of people. So I think like the overall answer to that question is we should end up with more inclusive working environments, more flexibility for where people can work, which means that, you know, maybe they can go live in their home country as opposed to having to work in one of the main tech hubs. So I think it opens up also new opportunities for organizations to work with people who aren't necessarily within those physical cities or countries.
Amazing. Right. Thank you both so much. Thank you everyone for listening. I know that normally after a design lab there's beers and pizzas and drinks, but please all have one remotely this evening or now if you really fancy it. I wanted to say, yeah, so after this we're going to be sending out, we're going to be all the questions that didn't get answered, we're going to be writing up answers and getting back to you all. We're going to be sending out a link to this video and the slides. We're going to be sharing some remote work guidelines from Novoda. If you do wish to ever get in touch with Foolproof or Novoda about design in these coming times, or even more advice on remote working or consultation, both available. Tim and Leonie are nodding along. And yeah, I guess that's it, everyone. Leonie, Tim, thank you so much. There's lots of thanks in the chat as well. Really appreciate you taking the time to put this together. Thank you for joining us. Thank you all for coming and listening. Hopefully we're going to be running one again soon. But yeah, everyone else, have a lovely Thursday and we'll see you all soon.
Thanks everyone. Stay safe.